Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter. Observe the month Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord Yahweh thy God. For in the month Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night, and that is the first month, or the beginning of months, as the Lord put it. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God of the flock and the herd, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there, which we know later on came to be known as Jerusalem, where the temple was built and so on. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. And it is, referred to here as a bread of affliction for the reminder of the affliction that we suffered in Egypt, right? As it says, expounding further, for thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. So eating that unleavened bread, right, known here as the bread of affliction, would remind us of the day we came out of Egypt. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coast 7 days. Neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrificest the first day at even remain all night until the morning. Meaning the lamb, right, that was killed for the Passover should not remain until the morning. And anything that remains until the morning has to be burned with fire. Thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, meaning, the Passover is not to be killed or sacrificed within your cities, except for, right, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, but at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in. And that's why we would all go to Jerusalem 3 times in a year. But for the Passover, you would really be supposed to go to Jerusalem, and that's where you would sacrifice the Passover. There thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt, being the first month. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go on to thy tents. That is to, return back to your dwelling place. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and the dwelling place being in the where the Lord would place his name, but the tents would be like the habitations, right? Later on, came to be more advanced, more like inns and buildings and so on. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord Yahweh thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee, which is 49 days. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. So that is when you begin to harvest your corn, which coincides with the ending of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So 49 days from there would lead to the 50th day, which would be the beginning of the Feast of Weeks, as we go into in verse 10. And thou shalt keep the Feast of Weeks unto the Lord Yahweh thy God with a tribute of a free will offering, that is a voluntary offering of thy hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. So it's an increase, a portion of your increase, right, that you have gained from the Lord. And the Feast of Weeks is also known as the Feast of First Fruits, because you would give the first of your crops, right, as an offering, a free will offering to the Lord. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God, thou and thy son, and thy daughter, and thy manservant, and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, or the widow that are among you, in the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to place his name there. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. So keep in mind that you were at one point a slave in Egypt. And so you have to always keep the Passover as it is a remembrance. Well, going back to the Passover, that is, but because that's a part of the statutes there. But it's a remembrance of, where we came from, right? Where we once were and how the Lord delivered us. Hence, we ought to follow the things that the Lord set for us, right? The statutes, the laws, the commandments, and so on. Thou shalt observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days. So that comes after the Feast of weeks, right? Like when I say after, I mean months down the line, right? You would then have the Feast of Tabernacles, which we went over that in Leviticus and Numbers as well. 7 days after that, thou hast gathered in thy corn and thy wine. So after your harvest of your corn and your wine and so on. And thou shalt rejoice in thy feast, thou and thy son and thy daughter and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow that are within thy gates, meaning in your city. 7 days shalt thou keep a solemn feast unto the Lord thy God in the place which the Lord shall choose, because the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thine increase, and in all the works of thine hands. Therefore thou shalt surely rejoice. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God, in the place which he shall choose. Because remember, Moses is talking to the children of Israel. They are still on the other side of Jordan. So he's letting them know, when you go into the land of Canaan, the Lord, there's a place where he will choose to place his name, where he would dwell. And that is the place where, that's why he kept saying the place where he shall choose, because it wasn't known just yet. In the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and in the Feast of Weeks, and in the Feast of Tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty, meaning you got to bring an offering. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee. So whatever increase the Lord has given you, whatever you can muster, you are to bring something before the Lord. Judges and officers shalt thou make in all thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. Okay, so in all of your different cities and territories, you would have judges and officers who would, handle certain matters, right, and settle certain cases as they arise. And as it says here, they shall judge the people with just judgment. So not being corrupt, right, not being swayed by money or being a respecter of persons. Verse 19, thou shalt not wrest judgment, that is to pervert judgment. Thou shalt not respect persons to show partiality or to be partial towards one side or another. Neither take a gift, which is a bribe, for a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise. Now, does that mean that instantly it actually makes you blind? No, but it causes them to look the other way, right? To purposely overlook certain things in the favor of the one who bribed them. And pervert the words of the righteous, meaning it would cause them to purposefully twist justice or the truth in a way that is favorable to whoever it is that bribed them. That's why you're not supposed to do that, because then you're not judging the people with just judgment. That which is altogether just shalt thou follow, right? So you're not going to follow any crooked ways, but only the right thing, all right, is what you're going to do. That thou mayest live and inherit the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not plant thee a grove of any trees near unto the altar of the Lord thy God. So where the altar of the Lord is set up, you're not supposed to set up any groves or anything by there. Thou shalt, which thou shalt make thee. So when you make that altar to the Lord, you're not supposed to do this. It is the Lord has specific ways in which he requires his worship to be. And this is not one of them. Verse 22, neither shalt thou set up any image which the Lord thy God hateth. And when you go into that word, or when you read this in another translation, right, it goes into a sacred pillar, okay, or pillars for worship. which the Lord hates. And that brings us to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.